Shatu from AFAS, African Forum for Agricultural Advisory Services. And today webinar is focusing on the most powerful tool, the digital tool, which is radio. Today we'll be hearing presentation and real experience from Farm Radio International staff from the field, as well as from experts and speakers and panelists. They are ready and they are with us. And the webinar is going to be for 1 hour and 1.5 hours. And this is going to be more participatory. And for just to refresh your memory, the first webinar was organized by AFAS and CTA. And the second webinar was with Access Agriculture on video. And today we'll be hearing more about radio, especially radio combined with the digital tool. So we'll be hearing that experience from Farm Radio International. So before I invite the overall moderator, which is Rex Chapota from Farm Radio International, I would like to invite Max Olupot, representing AFAS, to welcome us and to give us a welcoming remarks. Max, over to you.
Thank you, Samson. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And welcome to this third webinar series. This afternoon, this evening for different zones. Few minutes ago, probably Nova sent an article. And in that article, it was very clear that researchers have been doing a lot of research, but they found that farmers are likely to adopt improved practices, innovations, if supported by technical advice coming from extension. Therefore, this discussion is a discussion which is very critical in the eyes of AFAS. I bring you greetings from Dr. Slim Nandi, the Executive Director of AFAS, who took few days off to rejuvenate himself a bit because of the hectic schedules that we have in AFAS. Being a small group most times, there's a lot of work, but we say he wanted a few days off. So we are here standing for him. And he also has all the blessings for this meeting. He sent his message and said greetings to everybody in the meeting. Firstly, I wish to thank so very much Farm Radio International for accepting to lead this third webinar. Indeed, Farm Radio International is not a strange partner to AFAS. We've done a lot of things together. We've co-organized events. We benefited from each other's expertise in terms of moving agriculture extension and advisory services forward. Going back to the topic of the discussion this afternoon for East Africans particularly, radio in all essence is a very known technology, and to some people when you talk about radio, they are very familiar with it. And indeed, when most of us were growing, the only technology which was known perhaps in my village was the radio. And radio brought people together. Radio made families to have the cohesion. The agriculture officers of those days were not so much on the radio. I think they had not found the potential that the radio has in terms of reaching the masses. We are grateful that we've now gone into radio to turn the world, which is more scattered, to a world that is in cohesion. So in the same vein, we appreciate very much the work that Farm Radio International is doing. Integration of other technological elements, devices into the radio has made it even more fantastic. The FM radios in rural areas are a song for everyone, not only in agriculture, both in other sectors, including politics, including football. You find the youth in areas where there is no TV, they are all accumulating within the radio. But it has also been made easy that even in our phones we have the radios. Therefore, I think if you look through the statistics, radio is the most popular technology that we can use to reach the farmers, that we can use to reach the masses, and the masses can have the access, the masses can afford it, because there's a radio which is even less than $5,000 in the villages. So that affordability alone is the critical element that we need for rural smallholder farmers in Africa. People are poor, but they can be able to afford things that they can use beyond one purpose. They will listen to the news, but also they will listen to agriculture. Therefore, this discussion this afternoon is very critical. We invite everybody to actively participate in the discussions. And again, we thank so much Farm Radio International for accepting to come and share your experiences. Thank you so much, and I wish all of you very good interactions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Max Solupot from AFAS, for those inspirational words. You know, Max is the most powerful agricultural extension and advisory service personnel. If you give him even 2 hours, he can talk perfectly about radio. He's from typical rural areas. Thank you very much once again, Max, for that welcoming remarks. So again, as Max also said, and we'll be hearing soon, radio is the oldest, yet the most powerful digital tool, especially to reach millions of smallholder farmers. Especially now radio, when it is combined with different tools like the interactive voice response and mobile and other functionalities, it is becoming the most powerful tool, especially in this COVID pandemic. Definitely we'll be hearing different experience from Farm Radio International in different African countries, practical experience. I'll not take much time on that. Just few housekeeping rules or some announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please introduce yourself in the chat box. Write your name and also your organization and also the country where you are joining this webinar. That's very important. And also our colleagues joining us from Francophone countries, please, there is interpretation. Click in the icon so that you can select the French channel. You can listen some summaries of the discussion in French. Again, if you have any question, please use the Q&A box so that colleagues from Farm Radio International and from AFAS, they will be responding your question directly. And we'll be scanning again the Q&A box and we'll bring very important questions that needs response in the plenary session. We'll be having the Q&A session in between. So we'll bring those important questions, especially for lesson learning and that needs any reflection. We'll do that. And also, again, if you have any comment and suggestion, please use the chat box so that, and also you can interact, you can network, you can interact using the chat box. I will be also scanning and I'll bring those comments and suggestions also in the plenary session. So please feel free to interact, to network using the chat box. So with this few housekeeping announcement, let me invite Mr. Rex Chapota from Farm Radio International, who will be moderating this webinar so that to take us through the program and the process, the whole process. Mr. Rex Chapota, please welcome, and the floor is yours. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samson Eshetu, for the facilitation of the first segment of this webinar. Let me welcome all of you to this webinar across the whole of Africa, and also I can already see there are others from the United Kingdom, and I can see people from West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa. You are all welcome. As indeed Samson and Max mentioned, this is an AFAS webinar under the series of digitalization of extension services. And today, we are looking specifically at the power of interactive radio. And when you mention interactive radio in agriculture and advisory services, you are very sure Farm Radio International will be part of that dialogue. That's why today our main speakers are coming from Farm Radio International. Before I invite the panelists, let me also thank AFAS for indeed inviting Farm Radio International to be part of this series, knowing that there are so many digital tools, and to be able to be part of this series is a big honor to radio and indeed to the small scale farmers who solely depend on radio in most of the circumstances, as it were. Therefore, let me now introduce our panelists today. Our main speaker for the day is Mr. Kevin Perkins. Mr. Perkins is a Canadian coming all the way from Ottawa, has curtailed sleep today to be on this webinar, and he is the executive director of Farm Radio International since 2006. He has actually catapulted Farm Radio International from a small organization that was operating in Canada to become a big name in extension and advisory services. Actually, Kevin's passion is to see the information needs of small-scale farmers being met by the power of radio. You are welcome, Mr. Kevin Perkins.
Thank you, Rex, and greetings to everybody who is participating in this webinar. Special thanks to Andrew for his support in our participation, to Max and to Samson, and thank you, Rex, and to everybody who's here, and to my fellow panelists. I have some slides to present to you, which will talk about Farm Radio International, but about the role of radio and the ways that radio is being modernized through connections and integration with other digital technologies to make it an even more powerful agricultural advisory tool. So just a few slides now about Farm Radio, and then I'll return to a little bit more detail in a moment. But first, just in terms of the vision that inspires the work that we do, we're really committed to seeing that the hard work of African farming families leads to prosperity and food security for themselves, their communities, and their countries. And we know that radio has a vital role to play in making this a reality. As we've heard so eloquently from Max and from Samson, and really I barely need to present these slides after their wonderful introduction, It is the world's most popular mass medium, really, even in every part of the world, radio remains a very popular mass medium. It's especially important in rural Africa, where people absolutely depend on it for information. It's available to practically everyone. We heard about how it's even comes from people's mobile phones, their feature phones. They can listen with an earbud at any time, any place. It has the power to transform lives. It actually brings about change for individuals and for communities. And radio now, with new digital technologies, has really changed. It still has many of the same benefits it always has, but with digital technologies, it's now even more powerful. And I'll talk further about that later in this presentation. So again, a bit more about Farm Radio International. Just a snapshot. We have over 1,000 radio stations across 41 countries of sub-Saharan Africa that are in our network that we interact with. We support those radio stations in putting better radio programs on the air for their listeners. And there's about 200 million, more than 200 million listeners to those stations. Additionally, we operate projects. Right now, we have 35 active projects in several of about 11 of those countries. And again, I'll speak more about that further in the presentation. We're really concerned about impact at scale, appropriate scale, but still real impact at scale. And I think that's an interest that many of us have that work in this sector. And really one of the reasons that digital services are so interesting to us is that the potential for scale. And just our work, and I know we're not alone in this space, but our work reaches 33 million people. And interacts with many of them using our sort of mobile interaction systems. During the radio programs, listeners can interact and be part of it. 365,000 individuals have interacted with projects we've done in the last year, and about 2.7 million, we estimate, improved their practice. They took up one of the featured practices in a radio program because they listened, in part because they listened to the program. So why radio? I feel like I can be quick with these slides because, again, Max gave a very, very powerful argument in favor of the continued use of radio. First, widespread, so addressing the need for large scale and mass reach that AFAS has spoken about. Although it's more than 100 years old now, it's still the world's most popular, as I mentioned, and reaches billions of people, and it can be found practically everywhere. It's very accessible, meaning it really reaches the last mile, and it's on demand. It's there when farmers are available to listen, ideally, especially with the new digital approaches we're taking. It's more available on demand, but it reaches everyone, men, women, young and old. We find that all segments of the population listen and enjoy and benefit, whether or not they can read or write, and it's in their own language. So language, very often in their own language, and hence language is not a barrier to access. It's convenient, which addresses a concern for availability. One of the nice things about radio is you listen to it with your ears, and you can do other things with your eyes and hands, unlike more visual tools. It's possible to listen while you're cooking dinner, doing housework, tending to the garden, traveling in the bus or on your bike even. It's inexpensive. It's an affordable way for listeners and broadcasters, cost-effective way to share important information. So the cost, as we'll talk about later, the cost per person served is really very low, making it a cost-efficient solution. Radio is really nimble and flexible. It can respond immediately when new information needs arise. And we've seen the importance of this lately with COVID-19. with the locust plague, with the fall armyworm, with droughts or floods. Radio needs to be ready to turn on a dime and respond to new information needs quickly, and that's possible. And although it hasn't always been interactive, radio is traditionally a one-way communication medium from the broadcaster to the listener, which is really one of its limitations. Today, with the digitization really of radio, bringing ICTs in combination with radio, it's a much more two-way interactive communication tool, which we know is a more effective way to engage people when they feel that either they can ask questions or people like them can ask questions or share their experiences and have their voices amplified. But really, most importantly, is it works. There's more and more evidence. We've gathered a lot of evidence, but other organizations that work with radio and independent researchers are also gathering the evidence that radio works. And when I say works, it doesn't just work to raise awareness or to increase knowledge. It actually works in encouraging and driving the uptake of new practices. And we've seen that again and again through evaluations, that when farmers learn about a new practice, they've heard about it on a radio program, they end up applying it on their farm. About 40% or up to 40% is not unusual, which when you consider how many people listen, 40% is a big number. And it only costs about 50 cents to provide one of these series, a program series, to a farming family. A whole series of episodes of a program, 50 cents is the cost per family. Another role that radio is beginning to play and can play even more is sort of an integration function, where it helps to bring other digital solutions that are coming up to the attention of farmers and help them use them. So radio programs can drive demand for other digital tools and kind of promote them and facilitate the use of them. And radio and messages from other digital services like interactive voice response, social media, SMS, and so forth, they can be reinforcing messages. And we know the importance of redundancy in advisory services, of people hearing similar messages from various places at different times. So radio can help with that by reinforcing and encouraging multiple access to information. It's strengthening and modernizing extension, just further along that. You know, it's really not a competition with traditional extension services. Face-to-face extension is still important, but what radio can do is strengthen the role of extension officers by bringing them into the studio and involving them in serving their clients through radio programs. So we'll hear more about an example of that later. So just a bit more about farm radio, where we work. We work in both the countries that are green and kind of brown-orange, but the countries that are colored in the orange-brown sort of color are where we directly implement projects with broadcasting partners. In our work, we partner very closely with so many stakeholders, broadcasting partners, project partners. We work with a select number of broadcasters to do targeted programs and program series. It's very important that we have good relations with knowledge partners. We work very closely with research institutions, government extension agencies, farmers organizations to identify priority issues and gather useful information. We're also increasingly calling upon women's organizations as knowledge partners to make sure that we're addressing issues of the needs and interests of women farmers and addressing issues of gender equality. And just to give an example of the private-public philanthropy, civil society organizations we've worked with. Just again, to go into a little more detail on our 3 areas of work, there's the radio resources, in which we provide content and skills building resources to over 1,000 radio stations. And this is a light touch approach where we help this 1,000 stations bring a measure of improvement to their programs, make them more accurate, more responsive, reliable, and broadcast in a better way through radio resources. We also put a lot of focus on innovations, finding new ways to make radio even better. And then, as I've mentioned, we implement projects, and you'll hear more about that, a few project examples in a moment. And just a second on the way we've integrated more and more digital solutions into the radio program. We've developed a suite of tools we call ULISA. And ULISA enables listeners to interact, participate in polls, call in, pull information out of a radio program onto their phone, and so forth. And just in the last year, 365,000 people have interacted with radio programs using ULISA. So I'm going to close my introductory part now by turning the microphone over to my colleague, Linda Temba, who's going to give you a few examples of projects and work we've done in Tanzania. Over to you, Linda. Linda, by the way, is a project coordinator for Farm Radio International in Tanzania. Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Linda.
Linda, would you kindly adjust your screen so that we can see you? Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Linda Temba, working as a program manager for Farm Radio Tanzania. And in my presentation, I'll be sharing some of the experience from Tanzania, whereby we have been able to go through a number of processes towards having a radio program. And in all of this process, we have been having a support from different extension service advisor. And some of these activities to mention, we have an activity, formative research. This is an activity done prior to having any radio program on air. It's actually a research that is conducted in the communities to enable us understand the different knowledge gaps, different priorities, the particular target community we are looking at when it comes to a radio program. And to make this process a success, we usually have a big support from extension workers, whereby when it comes to the community entry, sometimes translating or elaborating of these research questions, and especially if we need to use a local language, then extension support services is usually a key. But also in coordination and policy guidance, most of our work, actually all of our work, relies on the country's policies and guidance, and different departments from the government of Tanzania have been supporting this when it comes to introducing us to different regions and get a buy-in for the work we are doing, but also understanding of different extension policies that are to be adhered when it comes to the work on the ground. So we also have a support when it comes to radio program design. So when we have done a formative research, we have a lot of information. Then we are going to use this information in development of radio content. We call it a radio program design, whereby we develop radio content design, and then it's used to guide all the content that is to be aired on the radio programs. So when it comes to the radio program design, we get a directives on what to focus, what areas do we need to keep more emphasis based on that particular areas, because extension workers really knows them better than we do in those areas. So during the program design, we receive a lot of support from extension workers in making a design workshop and the content successful. Next. When we have developed this design document, we now have topics, we now have all the issues addressed in one document. We then go to the next step, which is production and broadcasting of these programs. Radio broadcasters are now aware, they have been trained, they have been supported to be able to do the recording, the production, and now we are going on air for the radio programs. When we go to broadcast these programs, it's with no doubt communities really trust more when they hear voices of their experts, the people they see, the people they know, the people their government recognizes. So we give this an opportunity for the Extension Services advisor to be on air. They would answer questions, they would talk on different topics, just to make sure it's a platform they use as we provide it. So when you actually look at the statistics of office to officer to farmer ratio, then the radio becomes very good platform for an extension service advisors to reach wider community in radio, through the radio programs. But when we have radio programs going on air, we actually also rely on the extension officers in ensuring the content is what we want, is what is we expect, is what is good for that particular community. So they really help us in keeping the content at an excellent standard. But also the extension support when it comes to research findings and standardizing of the messages. So to make sure our radio programs are well informed based on the research, then different research institutes have been part of the programs, have been part of developing of this content, but also part of monitoring in making sure the message we give out there is standard and is validated and it's good for the use of the community we are working for. Next. Next. So we have examples here of some of the projects we have implemented in Tanzania very successfully with the support from different extension service advisors. For example, one of the projects we implemented is scaling up improved legume technologies in Tanzania. The unique feature about this project was a multimedia campaign. It featured interactive radio, comic books, farmer field days, and SMS. And when it came to the end of this project, the results showed us the estimated 655,662 people were reached through all of these multimedia that we combined to have a radio program and different other media going together. Radio alone in this project was able to reach 5,008 rural community people. But also we had 1,920 farmers attending the field days. 19.6% of all the farmers that were reached at least proved to have adapted one practices. But also through this project, we were able to influence some police and seed systems in Tanzania. And coming to an end, the takeaway was multi-channel approaches are more effective at scaling up agricultural solutions. That was with no doubt from what we saw, from what we looked at, and from the results we had from the evaluations. Next. Next. So this is another graph showing the statistics between the listeners and non-listeners. When you look at the listeners column, which is a bit darker, you can see they did more better compared to the non-listeners when it comes to the radio programs and use of different multimedia channels that we combined together. So it wasn't just a radio program, but it was a radio program with effect, just like what you see on the screen right now. Next, please. This is another good example of the project we implemented across 5 regions in Tanzania. This was increasing uptake of agricultural innovations. We shortly called it Uptake. It was funded through the New Alliance Program for Food Security and Nutrition ICT Extension Challenge Fund. The main target for this was to increase agricultural production in the cassava, maize, Irish potato, and bean value chain in 7 regions of Tanzania. An estimate of 1.9 million small-scale farmers were reached over the 3 years of implementing of this project. Coming to an end, 41% of all those farmers that listened to these programs, at least a single episode, they took up a new practice that was promoted during the radio program. And a takeaway was interactive radio programs are not just for awareness, they can motivate and support change. Imagine just one episode is enough to make a little change. And this was a 3-year project with more than 50 episodes that were aired. So this was just not a radio program, but a radio program for change. Next, please. So coming to an end, we had a quotation, just a quote from a third-party external evaluation. There are a number of evaluations internally, externally, that were done. And quoting this external evaluator, it was, I think the content of the program were of high quality. For the first time, we saw research institutes, farmers, and specialists at regional and district levels come together to develop content, which in most of the cases doesn't happen. Yeah, that makes the process a bit unique, whereby a group of different people come together to develop the content of a radio program. Next, please. This is another example of a project that was implemented in central Tanzania. It was on conservation agriculture, and the target was to improve food security of small-scale farmers. The project was implemented in Tanzania and Ethiopia. So when you come to the end of the project, an estimate of 2.5 million rural people that were covered by the radio signals in Tanzania were able to be reached with the radio stations. But 350,000 farmers in the Dodoma region of Tanzania had listened to the radio programs, and 77% of end-line respondents reported using one or more conservation agriculture practices, significantly higher for listeners versus non-listeners. We can see in the next graph how the statistic shows. But the takeaway here was, the takeaway here was interactive radio can significantly strengthen the effort of face-to-face advisory services and reach of isolated communities. Another unique feature in this program was the use of organization of community listening groups. To the areas where we did not find the signals of radio program very well, we organized the community listening groups, and they had an opportunity to listen radio programs even after the radio programs had aired. Then this was recorded and it was shared to the groups, and they had a chance to listen. So it was very unique that the face-to-face advisory services still supported the communities that were not well covered with the radio programs. Next, please. This is a statistic showing listeners and non-listeners. When you look at the dark row below, it shows the listeners, which is higher compared to the non-listeners. Next, please. It's the same, showing different practices that were adapted during the programming. And the dark column shows those that listened to the radio program had more rate of adapting to this practices compared to those that did not listen to the radio programs. Next, please. Thank you, Kevin. That was my end of my sharing some of the experiences from Tanzania.
Thank you very much, Linda, for a wonderful presentation on the experiences on the ground. And as we continue, we are coming from Tanzania, where we are seeing how face-to-face extension complements the work of interactive radio, so that as a team and as together, we can meet the information needs of small-scale farmers. And as we go to Ghana, let me welcome our country representative in Ghana, and his name is Mr. Benjamin Fiafo. He is the oldest serving country representative in Farm Radio International, and has got a very big passion on how radio can work hand in hand with other digital tools in this digitalization process of extension and advisory services. And there is a unique program happening in Ghana, which Ben will share with us to see how indeed we can work together with other digital tools to influence policy and strategy as we meet the information needs of small-scale farmers. Welcome, Mr. Benjamin Shiafo.
Thank you very much for the elaborate introduction. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Linda. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all of you. My presentation is mainly to elaborate on what farm radio can do beyond projects. We are not only looking at working on projects, but we are doing everything possible, one, to enable our work to go beyond projects and become a more sustainable communication platform for advisory service and extension delivery. Beyond this, we are also working to ensure that it becomes a well-institutionalized process for our various country extension services. In line with this, Farm Radio in Ghana, in collaboration with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, specifically the Directorate of Agriculture Extension, had embarked on this initiative. And this initiative is to ensure that we have interactive radio as a sustained, highly effective feature of the public agriculture extension system in Ghana. And we are doing this by ensuring that it is embedded and funded by the Agriculture Extension Directorate to enable all regions, all districts to have high quality radio program that we call the Green Leaf Magazine program, plus other complementary digital services, such as the ones that are supporting weather information, market information, and video content providers, all coming together to enable our extension officers deliver a comprehensive information to our dear farmers within the various value chains they are working. Next. This is one of the quotes from the Extension Directorate when we started working on this initiative. That even though they have 4,282 agriculture extension officers, this is a very big increase from the previous 2,000, and yet still the ratio of agriculture extension agent to farmer falls short of the ideal of 1:500. On my recent trip, the ratio that they were quoting was more than 1:5,000 in one of the regions I visited. The cost of face-to-face also is very high. Digital from a distant tool, including radio, can bridge this gap. And we believe that this is not just only a situation in Ghana, but this cut across, I'm sure, most of the African countries, and it will be a needed thing to do to enable all extension systems and look at how digitalization is embedded in the agriculture extension service. Next. The background to this project is that MOFA, or the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, had invested in the e-agriculture services, including a call center, an IVR service for farmers. And we all know that this, we have 3 of this, one in Accra, one in Kumasi, one in Tamale. However, from all indication, these services are not reaching the farmers as expected. And the reason is farmers are not aware of the existence of these services, and then also they do not know how to have access to it. So therefore, having the digital advisory focal persons and the system in place, it will enable these services to be well known to all farmers within the region. Government initiative and government policy, which is the Planting for Food and Job, has a key pillar of using digital extension. However, as we speak now, there is no policy, there is no strategy, and it is still very silent. As a result of that, the Directorate of Agriculture Extension noticed that working to develop the policy and the strategy and the plan will help to ensure that there's so many digital tools that are available, and the radio that is already there become a vital part of their services. Next. As a result of that, these activities are currently are planned for this particular project. The first one is the National Digital Agriculture Strategy and Plan, which Farm Radio, together with a steering committee from the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and other stakeholders, are working to establish. Research has been conducted in Ghana and other countries to enable us have the necessary information to design the strategy and then get it launched as quickly as possible. There is also the development of a digital advisory desk at MOFA, the Directorate of Agriculture Extension, and then also there is a focal person at all the regions. And these focal persons are made up of a group of 3 people. And we have the regional extension officer supporting. We have the women in agriculture officer also supporting, agriculture development officer supporting, and then 1 key extension officer who will be leading as the focal person. This digital agriculture extension officer will be the one working directly with a selected radio station and with other digital service providers in Ghana. And by so doing, they will all work in one design, agreeing on content that needs to be delivered, the channel for delivering the content, and also making sure that they monitor and provide feedback to the National Agriculture Extension Directorate. Next. The ministry, as part of this process, will on yearly basis budget for this engagement with radio and other ICT providers. They will also ensure that this activity continue and trickle down to all the districts. Radio stations, specifically the government radio stations that has the wider coverage, are now the digital advisory hub, where 3 staff from the radio stations are selected and are currently undergoing training to support the ministry to ensure that there is a regular radio program with a repeat, and also a place for the team to work on regular basis. The whole essence of this program is not a projectized type of program, but rather it's part of the extension delivery, and from the beginning to the end, we are doing everything to ensure that it becomes more and more sustainable. So the content advisory committee and other businesses that are interested in farmers are all part of the stakeholders that are working to establish the digital advisory service delivery within the various regions. Next. The main activities for this project is looking at one, the establishment of the digital advisory plan, and then the development of a curriculum. The curriculum is being developed and is being utilized by the Directorate of Agriculture Extension. Facilitators who are going to deliver these curriculum are from the Directorate of Agriculture Extension and also from the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. This will enable the whole project activity to become part and parcel of the work that the ministry is already doing. And within the next month, there will be 16 radio programs, which we call the Greenleaf Radio Magazine Program, which is the backbone for the digital advisory services, airing in all the 16 regions in Ghana with the support of the Directorate of Agriculture Extension regional staff and the MAG Secretariat. Next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Excellent summary of the approach and the work that we're just now undertaking in partnership with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture in Ghana to really tackle the question of sustainability, but also integration, ways of integrating the various digital tools so that they complement one another and reinforce common messages, common sort of content agenda. So I'll just take a moment to conclude. I think we've all heard the ways that radio continues, even after 100 years, to be a very powerful way to serve farmers from a distance. And that also the new digital tools we're seeing are great in their own right, but another benefit of them is the way that they're strengthening and modernizing radio programming, and radio programming is making digital tools more powerful and relevant, and getting past the digital divide to the last mile. So it's this sort of integration that is what's new. The technology of radio is really being reborn, reinvented, thanks to the way that the digital tools are being integrated with it. But further, we're seeing the impact, the reach, the scale, and the actual changes that take place for farmers and their families and communities. So I'm going to close it there and thank you all for attending and for your attention. Thanks to my fellow panelists. And I look forward to hearing comments and the conversation that will follow this presentation. And with that, I'll turn it back to the facilitator of this session, Mr. Rex Chapota.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you so very much, Ben, for the wonderful presentations you've done in exploring the power of interactive radio on how it can work hand in hand with face-to-face extension, including how it can also be explored in the policy arena. So Dr. Samson Eshetu will be leading us in the discussion period. And there are already others who are raising their hands for questions. But let me make mention that so many questions have already been coming in the Q&A, and we are attempting to answer them all. So I'll hand over to Dr. Samson, and as he takes the audio questions, I'll come back after that to also bring in the issues that have been raised in the Q&A so that Kevin and the panelists can reflect on them. Over to you, Dr. Samson.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rex, for your moderation. Thank you very much also, Mr. Kevin, for your wonderful presentation, and also your colleagues, Linda, Ben, that's the experience, especially in Africa, from the grassroots level, that were very wonderful experience. So yes, Rex and Mark, they were very busy answering those questions directly in the Q&A box. I'm very much impressed with the level of questions are coming from participants. And just for your information, Mark is the head of stakeholders engagement at Farm Radio International, and Rex also Chapota is also the regional program manager, especially in the East and Southern Africa. Those people, especially from Africa, if you would like to interact more and know about more about Farm Radio International in Africa, please kindly get in touch with Rex. I would like to request also Rex to drop your email in the chat box so that people they will reach you for more partnership. I'm seeing people are already developing some interest to partner with Farm Radio International. So with that saying, maybe let's hear from participants. I'm already seeing some hands. Let me give a chance for participants. Then I'll bring some of the questions that were in fact answered by Rex and Mark in the Q&A box, but I'll bring those questions again in the plenary so that others also they will benefit from those responses. I would like to give a chance to Tufa Ado. I'm seeing your hands. Then next to you, then Lucia and Marvel. In that order, first let's hear your question. Tufa Ado, please unmute yourself. If possible, put off also your video so we can see you, and forward your question. Tufa Ado. Tufa Ado, I'm seeing your hands. Okay, let me go to the next one. Lucia, if you are ready. Lucia Ogunsumi. Okay, still maybe Lucia also is not ready. Hello? Or Marvel? Marvel Ebengo, I'm seeing your hand. Okay, while the participants are getting ready for their question, one question which really impressed me is people are still also following us on Twitter. One question forwarded from the Twitter by Pino Ivan Lewis. It was posted by Pino Ivan, and this question was brought to this webinar session by Maureen Agena. The question is, most smallholder farmers are women who lack access to radio. And if they have, these are owned by the men. Then how is this gap being bridged? I've seen an excellent response from Mark. May you kindly, any of you, to reflect or to answer this question in a plenary so that people also they can hear and benefit how we can narrow the gap, especially in accessing radio and also information through radio, especially smallholder women farmers. May any one of you maybe come on board and respond and reflect on this question, either Rex or Kevin or Mark. Did you hear my yes, Mark,
Samson,
please.
do you want me to? Okay, thank you. This is Mark Leclerc with Farm Radio. So I will say kind of what I said in my typed answer. There's quite a few things that we do to try to make the programs gender responsive, because it is quite a challenge. That's a great question that was put forward. We know that there's a gender digital divide, and in this case, an analog divide with radio. So we know that women have less access, less ownership of radios. So in many cases in projects, we design them in a way where women are able to take part in listening clubs, so community listening groups. And in those cases, because we know there's less access to radio, we will supply, you probably saw them in some of those photos, those yellow radios, which are powered by solar as well as crank. They are able to record the broadcast as well, because we do know that not everyone's able to listen at the same time. So those listening clubs are generally used, often used for women actually, where they're able to gather together in the community with that radio and listen at a time that's convenient for them. We also have built in things like women's only call-in lines with stations. So allowing radio stations to have a specific line where men aren't able to call in and give comments and questions, because we do know that they tend to dominate that if we leave it open. And then aside from that, we also have very specific methods when we have projects that are trying to address issues of gender equality. So I think maybe we don't have time to get into that, but those are some of the issues or some of the ways that we do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, that's very important response. So I felt that participants also benefit from this response, especially how we can narrow gap. I mean, how can we narrow the gap, especially access to information through radio by women and men. That was a wonderful response. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you can also see the responses in the Q&A boxes. You can see that response from Mark. Again, another question is from Joy Slats. In fact, this was also answered in the Q&A box, but I would like to bring also this question to the plenary so that others could also benefit. The question from Joy Slats is, how do you measure adoption rates of radio listeners? This is again very important. We can access millions of farmers through information, and also listeners, they can listen radio. Then how can we measure the adoption rate, especially from the radio listeners? Any response maybe from the FRI group?
Samson, I could.
Yes, Kevin, go ahead.
This is Kevin. Yes, it's a very good question, and it's an important question with radio, because it's not possible to know exactly who is listening or exactly how it's affecting all of them. It's the benefit of new digital tools like social media and phone-based is you can actually get data on the actual numbers of users and what they're doing and so forth. But with radio, you have to use surveys, and you have to survey a sample of potential listeners. And the sampling has to be done properly, so it's a representative sample of sufficient size that you can be confident, have a good confidence interval, statistical significance you can be assured of because of the sample size and the sampling method. So we do before and after, and sometimes in between surveys of samples of listeners, representative samples. And we ask them about their practices, and we ask them their practices in such a way that we can confirm that the likelihood that they are practicing it. They haven't just said yes because they want to agree and be polite, but we ask follow-up questions to satisfy ourselves that they probably are practicing. So by taking the percentage of respondents who are practicing and started practicing since the beginning of the project, and comparing those who practiced that were listening with those that were not listening, and sometimes even comparing listeners in communities reached by the broadcast with listeners in community or people who live in communities that were not reached by the broadcast, then we can begin to attribute the increase in practice to exposure to the radio programs. So that's how we do it. That's the main way we do it. And there's other ways, of course, we triangulate through things like case studies, focus group discussions. We can even look at data, secondary data about yields or about demand for seeds, for example, and we can look at how demand for seeds changed or other statistics changed from the beginning of the program, and even compare in areas reached by the radio program with areas that were not reached by the radio program. So we combine these various methods to estimate the impact of the program on practices.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for that response. Again, this is very wonderful again. Participants also, they can benefit from this response, how especially measuring the adoption rate from the listeners, okay, before and after. That's very important. And also, those of you who are interested to know more practical studies, you can also visit the Farm Radio International website. I hope Mark will be sharing the website in the chat box so that you can visit the website and you can get those reports practical in different countries. Again, I think I'm seeing now Lucia, are you ready to forward your question? Lucia, please unmute and go ahead, please.
Like
Lucia?
I wanted to ask, yes, please. Can I talk? Okay. I wanted to ask, how possible to have a mini radio transmission in rural environments?
Okay, did you capture that question? Lucia, would you kindly introduce yourself from where you are joining this webinar and your organization?
Thank you. I'm Lucia Ogusumi. I'm from IRT, Institute of Agric Research and Training, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ibadan, Nigeria.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, any reflection for Lucinia's question?
That's a very good question as well. And people often are interested in establishing small radio stations to serve particular populations. And that can be done. The technology is not difficult, not too difficult. Technology is available. Licensing might be a challenge. But the big thing that's difficult when starting a radio station is the amount of airtime that you need to fill with content. It's a lot of time to have to find programming that you can broadcast. And so you need to be sure that there are people there who are going to have the skills and the time to fill up the airtime. Of course, you can play a lot of music sort of simply, but if you want to use it as an educational tool, you have to be sure that that there are going to be the human resources available to keep the airtime filled with content, good content. Okay. So that's one of the challenges with the micro stations, but the technology is available.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin, again for that response. One suggestion I'm seeing in the chat box from Olanike Deji. He said that the said adopted gender gap bridging strategy is very promising. However, there is a need for gender responsive participatory monitoring and evaluation to enhance the effectiveness and sustainability of the gender equity strategies. This is well taken. Thank you very much for that, your contribution. Olanika, this is a wonderful submission and contribution. Again, one question again, which I would like to bring to the plenary attention is from Phil Malone from Access Agriculture. His question was, how important is it to include farmers in content formulation? I thought that this is also very important for the participants. They can benefit from your response. How is very important, especially including farmers in content formulation, because we are talking about the content development is participatory. So how is very important, especially including farmers in content formulation. Any response, any reflection?
Thank you, Samson. If I may, I'd like to ask my colleague who's in the call from Senegal. Her name is Ramatoulaye Sarr. She's our regional program officer, and she's been working on a program in Senegal that we have around climate smart agriculture. Rama, can you speak to that about how we go about bringing farmers into the content, identifying content for the radio program and sharing their own experience and knowledge in the program?
She may not be on the call, Kevin. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think maybe she's not having access, maybe.
Okay. We had hoped we could hear briefly from Rama, but it's a very good question, and Linda, perhaps Linda could tackle that one.
Definitely, Kevin. So ideally, the programs are for farmers. And if we are making programs without them, then we are missing something. So the main reason why we need them is because it's their programs. They're the target. Would like to hear if the language we are using makes sense to them, they understand. If the terms, the arrangement, the topics is what they really want to hear. So the main reason why we really need them there, it's because these are the programs that are aiming that community and it's theirs. So that is the main reason why we need them there.
Thank you very much, Linda. Okay, I'm seeing Gilbert Damen is with us. Would you like to forward your question or any comment or suggestion? Gilbert. Gilbert Damen, you are muted. Okay, then again, maybe one last question again, which I brought from the Q&A box. In fact, it was answered. Was there any study done on which is the best time of the day to broadcast radio to farmers? From your experience, which time is convenient, especially to broadcast information through radio to farmers? Just from based on experience, maybe Benjamin and Linda, if you have any practical experience from your projects, which time do you think is convenient, especially, or the most preferred time by farmers to listen your radio programs?
Thank you very much. I think this is a very important question, because for every radio program, the aim is to ensure that the listeners are available at the time of broadcast. So for all our programs, before the program, we have an agreement with the station. We always conduct the formative research. And one of the questions we try to find out is the listening habit of the people. And this gives us an idea of the time they are available to listen, how they listen, whether they listen individually or they listen in groups. We also make sure that when we have this information, we are able to convey this information in the process of contracting the radio station. And it varies from country to country, from region to region. But the common time is the time that farmers sometimes in some communities do not go to their farms or do not go out at all. That day and the time they normally select is normally from 5 o'clock in the evening up to 9 o'clock. Beyond 9 o'clock, they tell you 9 p.m., they will tell you that farmers will be asleep at that time. Again, in some countries, for example, in a recent project in Nigeria, they requested the live program to be in the evening between 7 and 9, and the repeat program in the morning between 6 and 7. They give reason why this time is appropriate for them. But we also go further to look at between the men and the women, what is the time difference and how can we ensure that the time that is selected fits mostly the women, because the women may not have control over the radio set and all that. So when the time is suitable for them, we are very sure that that will be a good time for all the listeners within that coverage area. So we always get a time that is between 7 and 9 in the evening or early in the morning. It varies from country to country, region to region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben, for that response. Again, I'm seeing a response or contribution from Ethiopia also. Zalalam Naga, he's the country director in Ethiopia, Farm Radio International. Especially in the Ethiopian context, the best time is usually range from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. That's also experience. But again, the challenge is, especially this time is considered as a prime time, which as most people are needing that time as a prime time. So it's very difficult to get that slot. Otherwise, the best time is especially when farmers are going home, when they are gathering for dinner and so on. They will sit together, not only just listening also that radio, but also it's also a stimulate discussion among the family members. That's also is very important. That's a good experience and contribution from Ethiopia. Thank you very much, Zalalam. Are there any response? Maybe for best interest of the time, let me give a chance to Rex and maybe Mark to bring any questions that really strikes you or that needs to be shared to the participant in a plenary, maybe 2 minutes each, then we'll wrap up the session. Maybe let me start from Rex, because Rex was very busy responding those questions and also partnering and interacting with different people. Rex, would you like to share your experience? What were the key questions forwarded in the Q&A box, and that needs to be shared for the plenary? Rex, would you kindly adjust your screen so that we can see you, your whole face? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Samson. I think some of the key issues that came through in the chat box, but also in the Q&A, is the whole issue of language. Somebody raised up a matter to say how critical is a matter of local language in terms of broadcasting. And one thing that we've discovered in our work is that you need to speak to farmers in the language that they understand well, because it's not only about talking to the farmers, but also involving them in the dialogue. And we know that uptake of information and knowledge happens very well when it's being done in the vernacular language. So that's one thing that came through. Another issue that also came through is the whole issue of content appropriateness in terms of what kind of information is best suited for radio programming. And what we have seen in our work in most of the parts in Sub-Saharan Africa is that indeed there are other messages that are complex that need demonstration. That's why working hand in hand with face-to-face extension is also very key, because at other times you might need to look at demonstrations, you might need to look at leaflets. That's why Linda had a very key takeaway in terms of appreciating the multimodal approach. So it's not only radio in isolation, but it's also radio working with other mass media and other face-to-face approaches in extension and advisory services. Lastly, just to confirm that the whole issue about complementarity came out also very key, so that indeed radio is not there to replace face-to-face extension. Rather, radio is making face-to-face extension have more impact, have greater reach and scale in terms of meeting the needs of farming families, knowing that the farmer to extension ratio is very, very high in Africa. So those are some of the reflections that came through in the Q&A. Let me hand it over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rex. Any contribution again from Mark?
Rex handled most of it. I think there was one sort of a series of questions that was interesting around, again, the type of information that's on the radio, and there was a little bit of concern around bias. You know, if a partner comes in, you know, every partner has their own view of agriculture, obviously, and things like fertilizers and seeds. And I think the answer to that is we're a communication organization and we work with journalists. So we are, when we do our training, we really focus on trying to be unbiased, trying to cover all sides of an issue. So making sure that broadcasters don't just rely on one source for information, and making sure that they're able to question things and bring up alternatives when necessary. So, you know, if we're talking about chemical fertilizers and how to use them safely, also perhaps including some segments on, you know, green manure or something like that, to make sure that all farmers, no matter how much money they have or access to resources they have, they can actually benefit. So I think that's the approach we take. That's not the approach that everyone takes, but that speaks a little bit to how we handle that issue. But I think that's it. I think Rex covered everything else.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark and Rex, for your reflection and bringing those questions that were forwarded by participants in the Q&A box. That were very wonderful, sharing that experience. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost now concluding this webinar. Before I hand over to Max and Andre from AFAS, I would like to give a final remarks to Mr. Kevin from Farm Radio International to forward your reflection and what is your overall impression with this webinar, and also the level of participants' engagement and so on. Mr. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Samson. I just want to express my appreciation not only to you and AFAS and the other partners, but to everyone who participated and is taking an interest in how we can better serve small-scale farmers by using digital tools and digital advisory services. I think this is a critical issue at these times. It's always been critical, but even more so now, as we've seen the impact of COVID-19, reduced mobility, reduced ability to get to markets, to travel and so forth. And we're even considering it around climate change and climate mitigation, around thinking more about our footprint when we travel. And so offering services and support to many farmers throughout sub-Saharan Africa, using methods that work and that serve them from a distance, it's really one of the big and most important challenges of our time, I feel. So I'm just grateful to everyone who joins in this and takes an interest, and for your work in this area, for finding new ways to help farming families meet their objectives as farmers, feed their families, their communities, their countries, and enjoy more prosperity and a more productive livelihood. So thank you for your efforts, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kevin, for your words. And we are also very much happy with the experience shared from Farm Radio International. And also, I'm very much delighted also the level of participation from participants. And also, I would like to also thank Mark and Rex also for being very active, responding for all those questions forwarded by participants. Thank you also, Ben and Linda, sharing your practical experience from the field. I think with that saying, from our side, Andre was the architect behind organizing this webinar and making all the preparations, all those arrangements and so on. I would like to hear from Andre, his impression or overall reflection, then inviting Max for concluding remarks. Andre. Hello, Andre. I think Andre is also busy handling the French channel. Andre, maybe he will come later after Max. Let me invite Max to share his reflection and also his impression about this webinar, and also to appreciate and to thank officially also the Farm Radio International staff. Max, over to you.
Thank you so very much, Samson, and everybody, especially, of course, Andre, for organizing us, Rex. The number of emails that crossed, I said, wow, this is a very serious organization. And indeed, this is a very fruitful moment again for the extension fraternity in Africa, but also globally. From the standpoint of AFAS, we are so impressed and grateful for the participation of Farm Radio International in this kind of events and totally filling the gap and bringing this vast experience to the participants. So we are very grateful to Kevin and your team, and we look forward to this continued interaction partnership. Indeed, the task we have is huge, but together it is possible to manage it.
Is it from my connection or is this Max's connection?
It is in the digital world that agriculture is expected by 2030. It is as a very good opportunity of moving forward the African agriculture from small scale to medium to large scale and transforming the livelihoods of these people. So radio as a technology for that outreach, for the accessibility, for the affordability, and the cohesion it brings in the communities is no doubt one of the most important tools that we all need to champion. Therefore, from AFAS again, we want to thank all the participants who have actively participated and asked very vital questions. We may have not answered all the questions, but I'm also very impressed that following the question tag, most of them were addressed, but we do encourage participants to follow up with both Farm Radio International and AFAS where possible, and we continue with the discussion. Farm Radio and AFAS definitely have got a long-term interaction, but indeed, Kevin, I think this is also a great moment that we start to formalize this engagement. It will be very nice to have an MOU between AFAS and Farm Radio, which actually is a value add in terms of both institutions in working together. We have had this discussion with the Rex, and I think it's not a big issue that we can follow up with this. With this said, again, from AFAS management and AFAS team, we wish to say thank you so very much to everybody for participating, to Farm Radio for sharing their experience, for the facilitation team, the organizing team, for making all this possible. May we continue to network, and may we continue to render our service to the people that we serve during our time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall be sharing all the presentations and the recordings through